Hi guys, hope you're all well. Just been down to the beach with Alf and the family. Lovely day. Got my safeguarding done for a new position I'm going to be taking up. So I'll be working with kids from school and also be working with young people in general, so young teenagers and young adults, basically. There'll be a lot of kids that'll be coming in who are either just out of school and like they finished or they're in secondary school and basically be helping them out and acting like a support worker, trying to be sound and make sure that whatever they need, they get it, and you help them out with homework or if they've got a problem, they can come to you. And also, I'll have a supervisor, so it's just in case anything comes up that I'm not able to deal with myself, I can always escalate it up to the supervisor. Got really used to saying that in the corporate world. Oh, I'll have to escalate this or raise a ticket. Raise your hand. But yeah, it's good to get it out of the way. And also because I didn't have to do the manual handling side of it, that saved me some time. So I did manual handling in April, and that covers me for 3 years. So I'll be 29 by the time that expires. So I'm feeling old now. But enough of that anyway. I hope you are all doing well and starting that position very soon. And it should be fun, in the meantime. But the topic of today that I want to get done is something that is a very sad, true story. It's also a warning to everybody, I was watching a series on Apple TV called The Shrink Next Door. And like there's loads of people who did reviews of this like 3 years ago and whatever, but that was before the series came out. Most people did their reviews on the podcast. So it's quite an unbelievable story. It's a black comedy, and like I love Will Ferrell. I just think of Step Brothers. This house is not fucking present. So, and then the whole entirety of this sort of camel dicks. A paraphrase. I know most of Step Brothers quotes, but John C. Riley. But Dad, it's Shark Week. That's what I associate Will Ferrell with, is the big lovable goofball. With that head, the big head in them. Like in Alfred's. Paul Rudd is a bit of a goofy head in them as well. So both funny, but I think it really adds to the humorous side of something that definitely isn't funny, because it is quite a dark story. And amazingly, it's true. I usually think, oh, these things are loosely based on true stories, but this is very much it happened. Like a lot of people in the previous videos had to say allegedly, allegedly this happened just to cover their own arses. But since then, proof has come out and sanctions have been brought. So I think it's a cautionary tale as well when you're dealing with mentally ill psychiatrists, medically trained professionals who are in positions of power. It's a real warning to everybody to spot the signs and family members as well. So I'll get into the background of it anyway, and I'm going to show you the post that I have here. I'm going to share my screen with you. But essentially, what the story is about a man called Marty Markowitz, played by Will Ferrell, and it's a real person. Marty was a real person, and he inherited his family's fabrics company. Sorry, just one sec. I just had to pause it for a second. But Marty Markowitz inherited his family's fabric company, so they used to produce carpets and they made curtains for a production company at one stage. So he knew fabrics very well and was quite intelligent, from a very wealthy background as well. The family had offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. They also had Swiss bank accounts, trust funds set up for the kids. He had a sister, played by Catherine Hahn, who was also in Step Brothers, in case you don't remember. She's the one who says to Dale, John C. Riley's character, I want to roll you up into a little ball and shove you up my vagina. Is it true that you punched Derek earlier? I am going to pleasure myself to the image of you doing that. Yes, that's her. Derek, Adam Scott was also in another great series that I just finished watching, Severance, and I really want to do a recap of that. Not factual. I hope to God it's not factual. Great series, but I'll do another video on that because I just finished watching that as well. But The Shrink Next Door is about Marty Markowitz, who is a real man, played by Will Ferrell, and he inherits the family's fabric company, but lots of people don't think that he can do it. They don't think he's cut out for it. His uncle Jerome threatens to sue him. He wants to sue him for control of the company because he feels like it should be his because he's not cut out for it. And the reason they think this is because he's very passive. You know, he lacks assertiveness. He's very scared of confrontation. Um, so a regular customer comes in who's been a customer for a long time, Mr. Edelman, Edelman or Abelman. I can't remember. I think it's Mr. Edelman. I'll say, but he's saying to him that you made the curtain the wrong color and I'm not paying for it. I want it deducted from the final price. New York just looks like such a stressful place to live. It's literally like go, 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 and I'm not paying for this, and I'm suing you for this, and divorce this, divorce that. You know that there's everyone seems to be getting a divorce. Americans popularized it, but like an old man who's not threatening. You know, like what's he going to do realistically? Causes Will Ferrell to do something that I used to do when I was a kid. I used to like rub my head like this when I was nervous. You know, he kind of holds his head like this and starts breathing heavily. And he really lacks assertiveness. You know, he really just cannot deal with confrontation. You know, he can't make up his mind. He can't make decisions for himself. The annoying part about it is you want to scream at him, just grow a pair of balls. You know, grow a pair, man up. And that's the annoying thing. Like I hate those expressions, and yet I'm screaming them at him. I'm like, "Oh man, up, grow up here," and they're thinking, "Oh fuck." But I hate when people say that to me. So why would that be my automatic response? But you see, even with me, it is a very automatic thing. It's like you can't let people take advantage of you like that. You know, you're too generous, and you let people walk all over you. And really, where it's based is you don't want them to get taken advantage of, and you want to just go over there and tell everybody to fuck off and leave them alone. The problem is, and I think everybody needs to take note of this, is you have to do it for yourself. I have to do it for myself. You know, nobody can be with you 24/7, and it's an important lesson to learn. You know, nobody can look over you all the time and make sure that you make the right decision. You ultimately have to do that. And you're worried for him because you're like, oh, you know, he's nice. He's a nice fellow. He's going to get walked all over. People are going to take advantage of him left, right, and Chelsea. Um, and he doesn't deal with stress very well. He tends to just leave the situation and back down from confrontation wherever it happens. So you can't do that. You know, as a fully grown man with a business to run, you're responsible for a lot of people. So you have to manage people. You have to also not get walked all over, you know, because people will look for discounts and they'll threaten you. And if you just say, okay, that's fine, they'll keep taking advantage if you keep allowing them to. And his sister, Phyllis, she says, played by Catherine Hahn, FYI, Phyllis says you should go see Dr. Hirschkopf, who is played by Paul Rudd, Dr. Isaac Hirschkopf. They also call him Ike, Dr. Ike for short. And when he is short, I didn't realize how short Paul Rudd is. He's got a normal sized head, but then the rest of him is really short. It's kind of freaky. It really freaked me out when I was watching the show because the little tweed jackets and everything that he wears really emphasize it. But he goes in to see Dr. Ike, as he calls him, he just keeps calling him Dr. Ike. And he says, I don't want to waste your time, you know, I'm fine. That's something that comes up in the show. And spoiler alert, because I will be giving away spoilers if you haven't already seen it. But he keeps saying to him, you know, I don't know why I'm here. My sister wanted me to be here. So he couldn't even be assertive and say, I'm going to therapy. I need it. I'm struggling. It's no, 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 I'm fine. I'm fine. Everything's okay. Um, I should mention as well that they're both Jewish. So Marty is Jewish. In case you couldn't tell, the names sound pretty Jewish, don't they? But and Dr. Ike is Jewish, and why that's important is because it's a part of his identity, and it'll become a part of his identity in the story. Because he meets Dr. Ike, and Dr. Ike says originally something quite useful. He's like, you know what, you need to assert yourself more. You're a nice guy, but you're too nice. And he tries to sort of alternative therapy where he says, "Come with me for lunch," and he goes with them, and he says, "Order whatever you want, just whatever comes into your mind, order it." And he's like, "Oh, well, what do you think I should have?" It's a place that Doctor Ike goes to regularly for lunch, but Marty doesn't know it. He's quite anxious and nervous, and he gets stomach pains as well. Something that I can relate to with autism. I always used to get stomach pains, and used to have stuff plain. Now I can eat quite a vast array of different foods, but the anxiety definitely doesn't help. And he orders very bland food, like just a plain turkey sandwich, but he even has trouble ordering that. And he's like, "What do you think I should get, Dr. Ike?" And then Dr. Ike says to him, "The problem is you've never had to make any decisions for yourself. You're from a rich family. They own their own business. Everything was always decided for you. Now you're a big boy. You got to make your own decisions." And you kind of think, okay, it's a bit weird bringing them outside of the office and going around with Marty for lunch, and then going into a basketball court. So he says, "Come on, let's play. You guys need two players." They see a group of black lads playing basketball, and they say, "Can we join in?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, come on, you go on that team, you go on that team." And Marty says, "Oh, but I'm not really good at it. My hand-eye coordination's not great." And Dr. Ike says, "It's okay, just hop in." And he tries to just basically, force him to do it. And then he says, "Pass me the ball." Now he's on the other team. He's like, "Here, I'm open, pass me the ball." And because he's quite forceful and assertive about it, Will Ferrell goes, "Oh, here you go," and throws him the ball. And then all the lads are like, "I was open. You just handed him the ball. You gave him an easy shot, like, a free shot. Why'd you do that?" And then Will Ferrell's like, "But Dr. Ike, you said pass the ball. You made me pass it to you." And he was like, "I didn't make you do anything. I just asked for the ball and you passed it to me. So it's kind of interesting. It's like that's actually a good lesson. And that's the whole point of it. And I've heard everybody else say it started out well, because he was like, "I didn't make you do anything. I said, pass me the ball. You had to actually physically give it to me." Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you are in control. You can decide not to pass it to me. That's kind of what I got from it anyway, which I think is a good lesson. And you can see him, Marty's kind of thinking, "Oh, yeah, yeah, maybe you're right. Um, and it does start out as a good relationship. They go into a frame shop, for picture frames. Um, because Marty starts having a panic attack or what looks like a panic attack when he has to confront his ex-wife or ex-fiance, sorry. So that's obviously another big trigger of anxiety. He can't stand up to her. She wants him to pay for a trip to Mexico because while they were still together, he promised her a trip to Mexico and said he'd pay for it. And she's demanding this. And he's like, "Oh, but I really don't want to, but I have to because I said I would." And Dr. Ike says, rightly, in my opinion, "No, you're not paying for this. You are no longer together. You were going to go as a couple. Here's a dime. This call won't cost you anything. So he's like, "I'll donate my own dime," even though Marty's paying him $45 per hour. And it's back in 1981, I should say. So it seems pretty cheap for therapy in New York, but it's Manhattan as well. Quite pricey. Upper Manhattan. Don't know much about America, but I know Upper Manhattan's quite a nice spot. Quite expensive as well. It's only gotten even more expensive. I'd hate to think what the price of therapy in there is now, but he makes him make the phone call. And I heard a lot of, because I did my research before this, and I heard actual doctors like psychiatrists, but also just counselors and therapists, what their thought was on this. And they think gradual exposure is better. So it's like that could work, but gradually. So say if something makes you anxious, say if you're anxious about swimming, for instance, that always seems to come up. We'll even use me and driving. Okay, so me, I can relate to that in terms of driving. It makes me quite nervous. there's a good reason for that. My hand-eye coordination's not great, but I'm also afraid to do it, and I feel ashamed to admit that I'm afraid to do it, and that's the real reason why I'm not doing it. It's not that I can't do it because I've proven that I'm capable of doing it, but I'm all over the place. I don't believe in myself. It makes me uncomfortable. But you know what did help? Rather than getting in a manual car, which when I stall it, I'm terrified. And if Americans don't know what that is, you drive a stick. You guys, do you drive a stick? That's what they say. Manual car. I'm sure everybody knows, but I think you guys have a good idea with automatics. I prefer automatics for sure. But rather than actually, doing lessons and hopping into a manual car, which I could have done, and everybody was, my dad is always like, oh, you have to do a manual, you have to. No, you don't. And really, why not do automatic lessons? Because it gets me in the car, it gets me practicing. And I'm also with the driving instructor from the Wexford local development. So he knows that, you know, I have issues basically, and that I'm not necessarily a very confident person. To say if I got an instructor, and a big fear of mine would be what if the instructor's a prick? What if I fail my test and I have to pay again? Like what a waste of money, and I'm thinking, what if I crash the car? What if I can't even park the thing? I'm so old that I should be able to do this by now. But gradual exposure gets me in the car. We go through the safety mechanisms of the car. I drive around the cinema car park a few times, and in the first day, I'm out in the main road, and I loved it. I actually couldn't wait to get in the car and drive it again. I never thought in a million years I'd do that. So gradual exposure is good. And then what Peter, the lad helped me out, the instructor, what he'll do is he'll say, how comfortable do you feel now if we practice reversing? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And rather than getting me to jam on the accelerator, he's like, just use the momentum of the car. We're on a slight dip, so let yourself roll back. So that takes away me having to actually use the accelerator and put the car into reverse. And there you go. And you just let the thing roll backwards. You keep looking, you keep checking. That helps me because I'm someone I can relate to Marty and oh my God, what if this happens and what if this person gets upset? And that's the thing that I want to highlight. He's clearly not anxious by physical threats. It's I'm going to be sued, they're not going to come back, I'm after losing customers with Mr. Abelman. I don't know, that's going to really annoy me. But he's in the first episode and he's a customer arguing with Marty in the first scene. So there we go. But he's been a regular customer, and it's kind of like Marty seems to want to prove to his dad and his mom, who are both dead now, I won't let you down, I'm the man for the job. And he doesn't want to ruin that. So there's a family legacy there. And it's a bit of shame attached to that, I'd say, where he doesn't want to let them down. His dad could do it, his uncle could do it, but he really doubts himself. He really just cannot back himself to do it. So his sister Phyllis is there, and she's a bit more, straight talk, and she doesn't really seem to give a shit about what people think as much. She helps Marty out. She kind of babies him in a way, but in fairness to him, he looks after her two kids, his nephew and niece. And he's obviously a very loving guy. He's very warm and gentle. So those are those qualities. He's very warm, he's very friendly, and he treats them like they're his own children. And you can see how excited and happy they are when they see him. And Phyllis has been through a lot herself. She had failed businesses, she had a failed marriage. She put it, my husband started fucking his secretary. At least you didn't have to find out that way. But she invested a lot of time into her own marriage, and failed miserably. She helped her husband out a lot, and then as soon as he was capable and his business was up and running, he fucked off and left her. So that's quite disheartening for her. So she's obviously been through a lot herself and might be very misguided at times. But you can see that both of them have issues from their childhood. And the reason why I say it's important to note that they're Jewish is because Marty's bar mitzvah, today you are a man, muzzle tov, l'chaim. Um, my brother told me the Hebrew word for a non-Jew, goyim. Oh, goyim. What a good word. Oy vey, everybody, oy vey. But at Marty's bar mitzvah, everybody was waiting for him. You could see his dad getting quite tense. Where is that kid? It's his big day. And he's in the toilet with stomach cramps. And Dr. Ike says to him, why don't you have another bar mitzvah? You know? He's like, why not? Let's do it. And Marty's like, another one? Oh, but I was so nervous at the first one. And he doesn't like people making a fuss. You're kind of wondering, are you Irish? Because we hate people making a fuss. He doesn't like parties, and he says this regularly. He's quite an introverted character. He doesn't like anybody making a big deal about him. He doesn't like to be the center of attention. He hates the attention being on him. Which again, I can completely relate to that. At least before, when I was a kid, I hated people looking at me. I hated being the center of attention. Now I'm a lot more comfortable with it, obviously. Um, but you can kind of see Dr. Ike is like, you never got a proper bar mitzvah. You want to have one, and you want to, you know, celebrate, because it is a celebration. It's like a confirmation for us Catholics. It's a big day, and you're proud. All your family are there. So, you want it to matter, want it to mean something. And Dr. Ike has it with him. He invites a lot of his own friends, and this will be a common theme throughout because this is where you start to see the story switch a little bit. He gets Marty to fork out for the whole thing, but I mean, it's his bar mitzvah, but it was kind of Dr. Ike's idea. Marty has the money, but you know, Dr. Ike's kind of overstepping the boundaries there. And another common theme, because this man violated every code, every ethical code in the psychiatry handbook. He broke it, especially do no harm because he did plenty of harm to poor Marty, as we'll find out. Phyllis thinks this is a very weird idea, and she's the one that suggested that he go and see Dr. Mike Kirschkopf. Remember this? So it's her suggestion, and that's something that Marty keeps saying. You told me to go and see him. I didn't want it. And now I'm actually getting something from it, you know? And this is where Dr. Ike kind of goes, oh, look, Phyllis just doesn't support you. She's taking advantage of you. She wants your money because he's the right, but he's like the proprietor of the what is it? I know the word, and it's going to come back to me in a second. But he is basically in control of the family funds. You know what I mean? The sole heir, if you will. That word's really going to annoy me. I'm going to just pause and have a think for a second. Executor, that's the word. It's after coming back. Basically meaning that he carries out the parents' best wishes, so whatever they wanted, he's the executor of that. And he can decide Phyllis gets nothing, his sister. And Dr. Ike, as she starts to, drive a wedge between Marty and Dr. Ike, she goes into his office to visit him. And you can see how persuasive he is. If Paul Rudd's portrayal is as accurate as I think it is, where he starts to say, who looked after you, Phyllis? You were looking after Marty. Oh, and your parents seemed to trust him. He was the golden boy. That's what she said. That's what she said. But she said that Marty was the golden boy who could do no wrong, and parents were more harsh on her. And you can see Dr. Wright trying to worm his way in, and basically go, nobody hears you, but I hear you, I'm here for you. And I mean, it looks like she was going to see him as a patient, And I went to see a counselor before, and he said it's a conflict of interest for me to see you and your brother because my brother had been to see him already. And then I went to see him, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, I can't see someone from the same family because it introduces an unfavorable bias." But he instantly said, "No, I can't do this." And I think even if she's not a patient, surely there's a rule there where that's a conflict of interest because he's dealing with Marty as a patient. So seeing somebody else's family member, I would say, would introduce an unfair bias, but Dr. Ike doesn't seem to care about the rules. But Phyllis does have good instincts, and she says, I might not be as smart as you, or have all your fancy little degrees on the wall, because this is something as well that Dr. Ike is quite flashy. He shows off, he has all his degrees on the wall and his achievements from New York University. He's a registered psychiatrist, that's for a fact, but he also has pictures of him with celebrities, and he obviously cares deeply about status. But Phyllis um, catches him out when, oh yeah, I know what it is. It's when he mentions one of her failed businesses, and she says, "Sorry, what?" And he says, "When your business went under," and he tries to worm out of it. He tries to dodge the bullet, and he goes back a few steps and says, Marty was the golden boy, and you weren't, and nobody ever heard you. And she was like, "No, what about my failed business? I didn't tell you about that." It's like, my instincts are very good and I don't trust you. So now Dr. Ike, he tried to weasel her out of the way, he tried to brush her aside by going, "Nobody heard you." And when he couldn't get on her good side, he's like, "Oh shit, now she needs to be eliminated. Marty, she's bad. Cut her out of the whale. She's trying to get your money." It's only further backed up when she steals belongings that were left in the whale. She takes certain jewelry and flogs it so that she can make money. There's gold and diamonds and everything, and I think it comes to over 500 grand, so over 500,000. And she sells it because she's gone through a lot of financial difficulties with her divorce and her failed business. She's really hammering that home. But you can see how Dr. Ike has very cleverly manipulated the situation in his favor because he's like, "Look, she's stealing these things. Clearly, she wants your money. She's going to take it. Marty, you got to cut her out now." And he uses Marty's anxiety to get the better of him. Marty Julie does cut her out and hadn't spoken to her in 27 years. And how long had he been seeing Dr. Ike? 27 years. So, you see the two things adding up. And over that 27-year period, just in medical bills alone, so psychiatric appointments, Dr. Ike racked up $3.2 million, which is an awful lot of money just in appointments. And then, as we'll see, there's more expenses. So he got brought on as an advisory counselor for the whole company, and it's called AFC, the company's name. Wanted his own office. He always was butting in, so trusted members of staff who knew Marty for long periods of time, knew his dad and everything. If they ever tried to get involved and say the accounts aren't looking correct because Dr. Ike's spending all our money, then he butts in and goes, "I don't know, Marty, we need to have a meeting. I think they're out to get you. I think you need to fire these people." He even had him fire Phyllis from the company. And I mean, it's really used against Phyllis that she's the one that suggested Marty go to see Dr. Hirschkopf, who was recommended by their rabbi, Rabbi Goldberg. Um, so a trusted source, their rabbi, and his sister. So he obviously trusts them. He goes to see the therapist, and he had to have a second bar mitzvah in a different temple, in Dr. Ike's temple, under his rabbi. And then his rabbi comes to him and says, "Marty's a patient of yours, but this is a conflict of interest. You can't be convincing patients to come back and get second bar mitzvahs. it's just unethical. But he's a friend of Dr. Ike's, and Dr. Ike's a very smooth talker. He's very good at getting people to see his argument, and he manipulates situations very well. He's very, very good with his words. So, I mean, you kind of say to yourself, how the hell did someone get manipulated like that for so long? But it's gradual, and I think there's a really important lesson in breaking you down over time. I don't know, like it's just bashing you until you can't take anymore. And if you lack assertion and a backbone, which I mean, and he really did in a lot of ways. I don't like to speak ill of mentally ill people, but you really think to yourself, as I say, Marty, just grow a backbone. You got to stand up to him. And it took him very long to do so. But obviously, he wasn't the only one because another patient had signed over $20 million to a trust fund in Dr. Hirschkoff's name, which was then, it was a will, so that if they died, he would inherit all the money. At first, he convinced people to set up foundations, like he convinced Marty to set up a foundation, because, who you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to build a legacy. That's what he starts it off as. But then afterwards, it's like, oh, you should give something back. It'll make it'll make you feel good if you give back. We'll set up a foundation, and they want to go into the foundation as joint members of the account. So you have to make a deposit each. Marty makes a deposit of $165,000. Dr. Ike makes, was he keeps talking it down. Is 10 grand, is that okay? Oh, you can put whatever amount you want. 5 grand. How about 2.5 grand? 2,500. 2,500. Americans say it like that. I say 2,500, but same amount. So do you see one's contributing this massive chunk, the other's only contributing a piddly amount? But who's the one constantly making very generous donations to the Yamas school, or is it Ramas? It was a wealthy, very well to do private Jewish secondary school or high school, if you will. Um, and Dr. Ike made several very generous donations to get his daughters in there. So anyway, I'm going to get into the backstory here and I'll talk you through it and then give my own opinion of it, and how it happened. So I'll share my screen now with you. This is the true story behind it. So here we are now. I'll move myself up. Dope. There we are. So there they are playing basketball. So you just see Will Ferrell's big goofy head. See if I can actually show you. You can't hear the sound on this anyway, but that thing really annoyed me, that plant pot. There's his sister Phyllis. There's the fabrics. That's Marty there, played by Will Ferrell. That's him having a panic attack when Mr. Abelman comes in and says they're not the right color. I want a deduction. I want my money back. And Phyllis sorts it out. And there's the infamous Dr. Ike. I think it's just important. Let's show you his office. So he's got all these wonderful drawings, but also qualifications and everything emblazoned across the wall. And it's just important to show you what kind of person he is. He's very flashy. He wants to be seen as someone who's very important. This is where Marty tells him he's fine. He says, I'm going to help you be more assertive, get up and go and stand up for yourself. Credible true story is right. You see this look of worry on his face. This is the extravagant pool parties that Dr. Ike used to host at Will Ferrell's holiday home in the Hamptons, which is in California. It's a very well-to-do place, where a lot of wealthy elite people. It seems like a place for absolute rich wank bags, like the snobbiest of the snobbiest. They just seem so up their own arse. It's unbelievable. I'd say they're insufferable people to deal with. It's really image based. Who you know, if I'm not mistaken, Jeffrey Epstein had a place out there, and also in Florida where he used to take people and do unsavory things. The reason why Marty is so upset is because He sleeps in the guest house of this house. It's a lovely big house now. And Dr. Ike sleeps in the master bedroom with his wife and comes whenever he wants, you know. And Marty actually says, you can have this, you know. He offers it after Dr. Ike's father dies. And we kind of get a real insight into Dr. Ike and what kind of person he is when we see the relationship he had with his dad. You know, his dad was a Holocaust survivor, seen as a hero, and yet he said to Dr. Ike, you will never amount to anything. You're going to be nothing. And that's kind of like the seed planted in the narcissist's brain, you know, right there. I'm going to prove you're wrong. I'm going to be a success. Look on my wall, Dad. Look how successful I am. Now do you love me, Daddy? Now do you love me? You know, that kind of way. And he is extremely narcissistic. Like, I can't medically diagnose, but I would hazard a guess that Dr. Ike, if he doesn't suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, he's quite high on the spectrum. So you see, he gets quite good at basketball, and Dr. Ike supports him. He says, "You're the man, Marty. Well done, you." You know, they become good friends. There's a lot of painting going on together. You see, he's got a pip in his step, and here he's quite happy because he can't believe how confident he is. So there was actual help there, you know. He even goes on a date with a woman, which Dr. Ike completely ruins when she starts asking questions, and she says, you know, I think you really overstepped the mark here. So they were at a function, a charity event, you know, to promote their foundation, and there was a baseball for auction, and it was owned by a very sorry, it was signed by a very famous baseball player. I don't follow baseball at all. I know Babe Ruth, John or Joe DiMaggio. That's about it. Bill McGuire and Barry Bonds. That's about it. But it's a famous baseball player. He signed it, and it's on auction. And the mayor of New York at the time, I don't know, was it Conti? Was that his name? I don't know. But Will Ferrell is like, it's $1,000 per seat, so per head. So how many people you have sitting down at this foundation? You have to pay $1,000 per person. So Paul Rudd suggests it, that we go to Dr. Ike. Sorry, he says, let's go. You know, this would be a great way to promote our foundation. You know, and you can bring um, your new girlfriend. You know, she can come as well. You can bring her on a date. Doesn't suspect that she's going to start saying the way you're treating Marty isn't very fair. But he's like, okay, we'll bring her on a date there. You know, they were going to just go on a walk around, I think, Central Park, which looks amazing. I have to visit there someday. But he starts saying, Dr. Ike, he starts going, no, no, that's not a romantic first date. You know, to be very romantic, invite her to this charity dinner. That'll be really good. And I was kind of thinking the same thing myself, to be fair. That'll be a good way, you know, bring her on out for a meal, have a nice time. She's obviously uncomfortable because there's a lot of rich, swanky people. Marty kind of goes, no, you know, this man here, the wonderful Will Ferrell, he's like, it's quite expensive though. And I'm already spending quite a bit of money and my business is going under, you know, I'm struggling to keep it afloat here. And he says, Dr. Ike, he goes, actually, you know what we could do? It's a stupid idea. He goes, you know what, you're right. It's a stupid idea to do that when we can bring 8 people for 6 grand. So there's a special price if you bring 8 people, meaning that all my friends can come and you can go on your date. So that's six of us, and then you and your friend and your girlfriend. Not only that, he convinces Will Ferrell to bid on the baseball, and the bidding it starts at about 5 grand, and then it goes up. and up. A former NFL player, I believe, he was bidding on it as well. So people with lots of money to burn. And remember, he was very nervous, Marty, about actually having to pay for all the people to sit at the table in the first place. He's kind of going, it's a bit expensive. But him, Dr. Ike says to him, bid on the baseball as well. And the bid starts going up and up. And then he screams 20 grand from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8, 20. And Marty goes, no, 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 10, 10. They're like, you can't go back. Once you go up, it's only going up. And he's like, sold. And then he's delighted. Dr. Ike is cheering and, over the moon. But who's financing it? Poor old Marty over here. He was like, great. But then he starts panicking. He starts having what he thinks is a panic attack, realizes it's a heart attack. And actually, it's Dr. Ike who sees him, who's about to confront him. And then he confronts him because he's like, are you saying I'm taking advantage of you because your little date says that you said I was? You know, he's crouched over Marty having a heart attack. He obviously can't think straight. And because Dr. Ike is the one that finds him, puts him in the ambulance, this only cements further. This man is here and has my back no matter what. It's my family. It's everybody else that's out to get me. It's my it's my fiance that's out to get me. It's my own family. It's former friends. They're the ones that are out to get me. But this man, Dr. Ike, will never leave me. He's my best friend. We're friends for life. Never mind that he's overstepped every boundary of a psychiatrist possible. Not just with Marty. It was said that he had a lot of very attractive female clients who were obviously quite wealthy as well, and quite intelligent, but they were struggling with their families. Will Ferrell meets Miriam, who was a nice and attractive Indian lady, Indian American, and he pushes her into the pool as a joke on who? Dr. Ike's suggestion. And Marty says, I'm sorry. And she says, what the fuck? What are you doing? But then she goes, no, no, I know. Ike told you to do it, didn't he? And he was like, yeah, he thought it'd be funny. And she starts crying. She starts saying, he's taking advantage of you. Like, the house in the Hamptons is where he met her. Dr. Ike is inviting all of his female clients, the attractive ones. Funny that, isn't it? So he can show them off. I know all these attractive women. Bringing patients to a pool party where there's alcohol. Not only that, he's touching them inappropriately. They used to be in bikinis and he'd be posing with them, and apparently he used to touch them in inappropriate places. You could imagine while they're very scantily clad. Let's say Marty at his own beach house was cooking the food, was setting up the party invitations, was inviting everybody, paying for private buses to shuttle people to and from the party, paying for different themes like safari themed or sorry, pirate themed. Not only that, Dr. Ike convinced him, why don't you buy the house next door so that we can smash through the wall? Sorry, fence, was just a fence, keeping them a wooden fence, picket fence, fence. And we can merge these two properties. And he's like, I like my one better. Marty says it's nicer, which it was, to be fair. And the septic tank in that house doesn't work. He got a building surveyor to take a look. Somebody trusted who told him, I wouldn't buy this place. The septic tank leaks. It's not great. It's not as good as you think it is. I wouldn't buy it. Dr. Ike says, oh, he just doesn't see the opportunity here. He's a naysayer. There's so much opportunity in this house. Let's merge the two. Not only that, he convinces Marty to cut down a tree, a cherry tree, lovely one, that his parents planted when they first moved into the house. And this house has a lot of sentimental value. And it's quite sad, actually, because he says, no, I don't want to chop that tree down. My parents planted it when they first moved into this house. It was kind of planting our roots. This is our house. This is our tree. It was a nice moment, but the grip that Dr. Ike has over Marty, you kind of really see it at this point because you're like, he'll do anything just to not upset Dr. Ike, which is sick. It really is terrible to see. Um, but the man had so much of a tight grip over him, like an iron fist. He ruled over him, and everything he said went. I'm the psychiatrist, you're the patient. And he'd undermine Marty all the time by saying he's not a well man. The date that he brought to the charity dinner, Dr. Ike said that he was relaying a message from Marty, which he wasn't. He was lying about this. He said he's not a well man, so I don't think you should see him anymore. His words, not mine, so I don't have to be accountable for them. Really disgusting shit. That is the house. Um, Lovely house, isn't it? That's Marty's house. That's not his at all. But Dr. Hershkov even got his own surname put in the postbox and pictures of him and his wife and all the celebrities all over the house. And he even got angry with Marty when Marty told someone who asked, "Oh, who's that child in the picture? Oh, Dr. Ike was really cute when he was younger." That's not Dr. Ike, that's me. Oh, but wait, are you a cousin or something? He's like, no, no, this is my house. That's a narcissistic injury right there. Because Dr. Ike's like, why are you telling everybody it's your house and not mine? You're making me look bad. And Marty apologizes, and that you really are thinking, say that it is your house because you're not wrong. But he just has no backbone. You just can't say it to him. It's been broken down so much. This man who has helped him be more assertive has also made him incapable of being assertive with him. You know, that's Dr. Hershkov's wife. She and the kids come over. They stay in the main house, and Marty sleeps out in the guest house. These are a few rich wank bags from Wall Street that live in the house next door, which this man convinces Marty to buy, even though he didn't want to. That's the bar mitzvah adieu, the second bar mitzvah. That's the funeral. That's Miriam. She actually sympathised quite a bit with Will Ferrell and said, "I know what Doctor Ike's like. You need to stand up to him," but he couldn't. He just simply couldn't. So much so that after he wants to walk with her on the bus home when they're shuttling people back, he says to her, "Can I walk just to say sorry?" And she's like, "You're lucky I need to pee." Because they're going to a gas station because the bus is broken down. He leaves her in the gas station, petrol station as we call it in Ireland, and she's like, "What the fuck?" Because she said something bad about Dr. Ike, and he says, "I think we should no longer be patient and psychiatrist. I can't see you anymore." How convenient when she starts to say bad things about him and turns on him. Obviously, this man is relaying it because he trusts Dr. Ike so much. They've got an unbreakable bond. This is the swanky dinner here. So you see that, like, all these people, Will Ferrell doesn't know because the date that's with him, she says, "Who are all these people?" And he goes, "I don't know. They're Dr. Ike's friends." And she kind of goes, "Oh, okay. And you paid for all this?" Yeah, but Dr. Ike claims that he paid for all of it. He's the one that's treating everybody, because he's the big man. Will Ferrell can't stand up to him, you know. So it's really sick how a psychiatrist who knows that this man has trouble setting boundaries and being assertive is using that very fact against him. It's criminal, quite literally. You see here, he's confronting him. This is a good image, actually, because he's confronting him and standing over him, and he's cowering, going, "I do trust you, I do." See that? The aggressor versus the victim. He's trying to always, please him and to placate him, basically going, "Yeah, I do trust you, I do." Try and remember what they said here. I do trust you, and there's the ambulance, I saved your life. That's what he says to him. He's like, if it wasn't for me, you'd be dead. You'd be nothing without me. That's what he says to him when Will Ferrell or Marty Markowitz starts to turn on Dr. Ike Hirschkopf. He says to him, you are nothing without me. I do believe we just had what we call in psychiatry a breakthrough. So it makes him feel like he's making progress so that he can chip away at his confidence. And we're out of time. Another thing that he does all the time is he says, no, no, it's fine. You don't have to pay for it. But he certainly takes Marty's money when he can and says, no, it's okay. I don't want to impose. But he knows that Marty will keep suggesting, no, no, it's fine. It's fine. And then once he says, well, okay, it's like say, oh, no, you take that seat. No, you take it. No, you take it. He's like, okay, I'll take it. Anyway, we'll read through this because it's really scummy what he did. So go down here. So this is from time.com, Mahita Gajanan, November 12th, 2021, 2 minutes past 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it says at first, Isaac Ike Hirschkopf, a psychiatrist who talked of having a direct approach with his clients, seemed just like the person Marty Markowitz needed. And he did, he seemed like get up and go. This is the kind of guy I need. Someone who's going to get me off my arse, get me a bit of a backbone, and get me motivated. When Markowitz started seeing Hirschkopf in 1981, he felt overrun with responsibilities, was grieving the loss of his parents and having interfamily issues over control of his family's fabrics company. And the therapy did help. And it did, it really did have an impact. You could see it. He's a lot more assertive. I won't stand for this. You're not going to take advantage of me anymore unless you're Dr. Hirschkopf. So the therapy did help, but soon Hirschkopf had extended control over other aspects of Markowitz's life, far beyond the boundaries of a doctor-patient relationship. Over the next 30 years, Markowitz would later allege Hirschkopf took control over his finances, moved into and pretended to own his home in the Hamptons, and orchestrated his estrangement from his family. Their relationship ended in 2010 when Markowitz began the process of taking back control of his life and calling attention to what Hirschkopf did to him. It's really sick, like it is. What's even sicker is how the New York, what was it like the New York Medical Board did fuck all when he brought complaints because he says, I think this doctor has overstepped his boundaries. This psychiatrist has acted unethically. He's broken the ethics of being a psychiatrist. And he kept on having to hound them and hound them. It took them 10 years to actually investigate, never mind, to do anything about it. And eventually, Dr. Hirschkopf was struck off. But here we go now. The strange, sad, and unfortunately very true story became the subject of the 2019 Wondery and Bloomberg media podcast, The Shrink Next Door, which was adapted into an Apple TV Plus drama of the same name, released on November 12th, starring Will Ferrell and Paul Rudd as Markowitz and Hirschkopf, respectively. In breaking down how this psychiatrist was able to exert total control over a patient, both versions of The Shrink Next Door illuminate the dangers of abusive and manipulative professional relationships. Here's the true story behind The Shrink Next Door and what to know about the real life figures whose stories it tells. So there was a podcast beforehand, which is when the New York Medical Board actually got off their asses and did something, having done nothing for years. Well, that's interesting there. Argentine judge charges 5 people over the death of bleeding pain. Yeah, I did a story on that. It was very well played by Paul Rudd and Will Ferrell. It was good. I enjoyed it. They made it a funny story, even though it really wasn't. But think you have to bring a bit of a comedic edge because it was such a sad story. You know, I don't think people would have been able to stomach it for very long if they saw a vulnerable man getting so easily manipulated. So a neighbour's discovery inspires the shrink next door. Journalist Joe Nocera, assumed like Kirschkoff, a New York-based therapist, owned the vacation house next door to his in the Hamptons, and that a man named Marty Markowitz, whom he saw taking care of the grounds, was the property manager. When he found out that Markowitz in fact owned the house and that Hirschkopf simply acted like he owned it, he began investigating. So this man, out of the goodness of his own heart, decided this isn't right. I need to investigate. He's also a journalist, so like this is the latest scoop. Should mention as well that in this time, Marty had a heart attack and also a hernia. So he was really struggling, physically and mentally. So Sarah discovered a deeply layered story of manipulation and betrayal. Over six and some bonus episodes, he breaks down how Markowitz came to be in a position vulnerable enough to cede control to Hirschkopf, and how after decades he finally cut him off. So yeah, after being completely manipulated, what was the straw that broke the camel's back or caused the camel a hernia? That's actually quite interesting because that'll be why they stopped seeing each other, but I'll get into that in a second. How a psychiatrist inserted himself into a patient's life. From the outset, it's clear Ike Hirschkopf is not a typical therapist, a quality hinted at in Paul Rudd's depiction in Shrink. By his unconventional practice of taking Will Ferrell's Markowitz on walks around New York instead of sitting in his office and directly confronting the sources of his patients' problems, Rudd's Hirschkopf, in accordance with Nocera's description of the real-life figure, is bombastic and status obsessed, constantly showing off pictures of himself posing alongside celebrities. And that's it, and you can kind of say, okay, this therapy is not conventional, but how many wonder stories do we see? The great stories like the King's Speech, Lionel Logue, and King George the Sixth. It's a great story. It's one where it's completely unconventional the way Lionel Logue works, and he's like, there are no fancy letters above my name. Quite the opposite of Dr. Ike Hirschkopf. He's very modest, whereas Dr. Ike most certainly isn't. He's very flashy and flamboyant and wants everyone to know who he is and what he's achieved or pretends to achieve. That's the thing as well with narcissistic people. They don't care how they get it, they just want the status. I think it's a really good example, because he doesn't care about preparing food or being the grill master or actually paying for anything. As long as people think this is my house and think more of me and admire me for it, I don't give a shit how I get it. I'll trample all over this poor man's rights. And unfortunately, people like Marty are very vulnerable to manipulative pricks like Dr. Ike Hirschkopf. Shrink Next Door podcast documents how he used his position of power and influence as a psychiatrist, trusted by patients, and that's the really sad part. They put utter trust in this man, trusted by patients to take advantage of people like Markowitz, who had established himself as a millionaire through his family's company, Associated Fabrics Corporation, AFC, for his own benefit. In real life, Hirschkopf quickly situated himself in positions where he could make decisions that had actual impacts on Markowitz and his family, such as driving a wedge between him and his sister for 27 years. Slowly, as the years went on, Hirschkopf isolated Markowitz from his family and friends and pushed him away from romantic relationships, often through the advice he gave Markowitz about how to handle these personal ties. Basically, making him paranoid and thinking everybody's out to get you, they're not for you, they don't care about you, they're only there to use you, but I will always have your back. I saved your life, I'm looking after you. You're not capable of looking after yourself, so I will look after you. I'm the good guy in all this. Anything they say is a lie. I'm the real good one, which is really sick. So, slowly, as the years went on, Hirschkopf isolated Markowitz from his family and friends and pushed him away from romantic relationships, including the woman he brought on a date to the foundation ball, the charity dinner, sorry. often through the advice he gave Markowitz about how to handle these personal ties. He installed himself as the president of Markowitz's company and opened a charity foundation with mostly Markowitz's money. I would say nearly all of Markowitz's money, gave fuck all to the cause. And sick how he made himself president of the company. That's overstepping every guideline I can possibly think of as a psychiatrist. How no one investigated this, surely you have to do reports. And I mean, I guess people do now. I know that my counsellor was quite open and honest with me about that. Um, Even he took calls from me, didn't charge me for them because he could see that I was really struggling, you know. But anyway, we'll go through this now. In a July 2021 interview with Forward, Markowitz described his time with Hershkov as living a lie. Someone finally hears me. Someone has my back no matter what. The reason I'm more assertive is because of Ike. But then, sadly, he learned it was all living a lie. He goes on to say, Ike sucked me into this cult of Ike, exactly a cult of one. I am God, basically. And he definitely had a godlike complex. Ike sucked me into this cult of Ike, and I was spending 6 or 7 hours a week with him. He kept me constantly busy transcribing his handwritten books. And this is the thing, he was like, this is all my hard work. Because there's a scene at the final episode where Marty and his sister Phyllis are burning all the transcripts. And Ike's like, oh, that's all my hard work. And Marty's like, I wrote them all. And he's like, Ike really starts reverting to, that's my property. You destroy that now and I'll sue you. And Marty goes, well, I'm the one that wrote it all. It's good to see him. We're like, yes, Marty. And he pushes him over and says, you ruined my life. We're kind of all rooting for you, Marty. We're like, yes, good man. Finally. Fuck you, Ike. Kept me constantly busy transcribing his handwritten books, throwing these parties, and I didn't appreciate what was going on, Markowitz said. He didn't let me have a girlfriend. I would go on a date, and he'd call her a gold digger. He would say, everyone is out to get you. I'm going to protect you. And I was stupid enough to buy it. I'd say vulnerable enough to buy it. I don't like calling people like this stupid. I'd say lonely, isolated, and under a lot of stress. To have someone who can deal with something that you're not comfortable with is actually quite nice. You kind of go, oh, everybody, he can deal with it now. He's helping me. He's here to make my life better. So we thought. Among the more heartbreaking losses incurred by Markowitz due to his ties to Hershkov is that of his sister, Phyllis Shapiro. Shapiro was her husband's name, her married name. Phyllis Shapiro, portrayed in the Apple TV Plus series by Catherine Hahn. Shapiro, who also worked at the fabric company, came to realize that her brother was consulting Hershkov on business decisions instead of making them himself. Everything was, what do you think, Ike? Is that the right decision, Ike? And remember, Dr. Hershkov is not a businessman. Of course, he claims to know everything about business, but he doesn't actually know. He's a psychiatrist. That's his business. He doesn't know anything about running a fabric company. The fabric company is the Markowitz family. They know it's in their blood. Dr. Ike likes to act like he knows, and Marty goes along with it because Dr. Ike knows everything. And unfortunately, that's the thing. He looked at him like he was a god, a cult of one, cult of Ike, as they say. As they're saying in this anyway. Shapiro, who also worked at the fabric company, came to realize that her brother was consulting Hershkov on business decisions instead of making them himself after seeing Hershkov herself for a therapy session. So it was a therapy session, which is completely unethical, I might say. Shapiro decided after the session she didn't trust him. He really couldn't, you know, grab her in and reel her in to his way of thinking, though he did try. As Markowitz spent more time with the psychiatrist, he started growing impatient with what he saw as Shapiro's lack of work ethic, basically calling her lazy and saying that she was sponging off Marty. Eventually, she quit and Markowitz stopped speaking with her. Yeah, she stormed out, but he basically made it clear that, it's my way or the highway. Dr. Wright planted the seed, and Marty said, if you want to go, go. And he cut all ties with his sister Phyllis, and he cut all ties with his nephew and niece, who absolutely adored him, and they looked at him as a dad figure. Later, in an effort to get her brother's attention, Shapiro stole money from him. At that point, Hershkov convinced Markowitz to cut her off for good. They didn't communicate again for 27 years. That's what it says anyway in the series. I haven't listened to the full podcast, by the way. I've only seen the series. Just FYI. As Nocera asks in the podcast, how could Markowitz allow all this to happen? He says, I felt I had no choice. Marty says, so vulnerable was his mental state that Hershkov's hold over him proved irresistible. In another episode, speaking about the experience of being unable to recognize that he was under manipulation, Marty says, it was so over the top, you just had to want to see it. You just had to want to see that. Okay, it was so over the top, you had to want to see that. For Markowitz, the damage is not just that he lost so much time to Hershkov's influence, it's in the difficulty of rebuilding his life in the years since their friendship ended. 30 years, like a complete manipulation and control. How Markowitz got free and what happened to Hershkov. We hope jail time, but I fear not. For a long time, and especially after he cut off his sister, Hershkov was essentially Markowitz's only friend. Divide and conquer, that old method. Isolate someone, isolate the victim you're going to manipulate from any support network they have. And then you have complete control. If I cut you off from everybody you trust who could have your best interests at heart, if I convince you, no, I have your best interests at heart, they all want to take from you, they're the real manipulators here, not me. And under the guise of not even the guise, he was a psychiatrist. So who's not going to trust a psychiatrist? They know everything about the brain. They're good for me, whereas my family are bad for me. And the fact that Phyllis stole from Marty only proves the fact more that Ike loves me, you don't. So Hershkov was essentially Markowitz's only friend, even as Hershkov took more and more of Markowitz's money and made Markowitz do an increasing number of chores and errands for him. Markowitz saw him as the only person he could depend on and trust. The unbalanced dynamic continued until 2010 when Markowitz underwent hernia surgery. And this was the real breakthrough moment of he doesn't give a shit about me, All this time I thought we were like brothers, and he doesn't give a shit. He couldn't even be asked to show up and see how I'm doing after my hernia operation. In the days following the operation, Markowitz noted that Hershkov did not check in on him at all and questioned their friendship. Some friend, eh? And remember, he's getting them to do all of this shit for him, Dr. Reich. He's getting Marty to run all his errands. Marty's the one paying his salary. He's paying him for the sessions and then doing all this other shit on top of it. So, what is Marty actually getting out of this? Manipulation, total manipulation. Dr. Reich is convincing him that he's doing something to help him out, but he really is just taking, just take, take, take. He's a parasite, a true parasite of a human being. Oh. And this is the thing as well. He's his only friend, so he keeps just convincing him, you are nothing without me. I am everything to you, but you are nothing without me. You know what I mean? It's really sad. You don't have your family, you don't have any friends, you don't have a girlfriend, you don't have a wife. I've told you, I've blocked all these people from you, but you're a loser. Nobody loves you. You've nobody except for me. I'm the only one that's here for you wholeheartedly, I'm the only one that has your best interests at heart, essentially. So Marty goes on to say to Joe and Sarah, I knew that he was the only person in my life. As I just said there, Marty told Sarah, all of these frustrations, all of these issues, all of this anger came bursting out of me, quite literally in a hernia. But I mean, if ever there was a example of a mental problem becoming physical, it's this. All that stress, all that tension, all that built up internalized anger. You just burst, you had a heart attack, the dangers of internalizing all that hate for yourself, and all that anger that you wish you could take out on somebody else, but you're too good of a person to do it. And I think it has to be stated that he is a good person. He's a warm and kind person, and it's so sad to see some absolute parasite taking advantage of that. But unfortunately, that's life. It will happen. So, with the help of some employees who knew Fershkov as a business consultant under a different name, Isaac Stevens was a pseudonym that he used. And you're kind of thinking, why do you use a pseudonym for business names? It's Dr. Ike Hershkov when I'm a psychiatrist, but it's Dr. or not even doctor, it's Isaac Stevens when he's working as a business consultant, you know? Who knew of Hershkov as a business consultant under a different name, Markowitz sent a letter telling Hershkov he no longer wanted to be his patient. Though the psychiatrist said he was making the wrong decision, Markowitz was done. That's it, finally, ball is dropped. I've realised it now, and I know you don't give a shit about me. It's taken long enough, but thank God I've realised. Okay, Markowitz was done. He stopped responding. He took back his house and reunited with his sister. It was a very satisfying moment where he changed the locks and said, "Can I get an extra one put in just to make sure?" And the locksmith goes, "Hey, pal, don't worry. I know plenty of bad relationships. It's not like I haven't done this before. Don't worry. We can do it for you." He's like, I really want to make sure I can't get in. And you can see that fear, what's going to happen here, and you feel bad for him. You're like, he's terrified of Ike coming over and confronting him because ultimately what he fears the most is confrontation. He just hates conflict, you know. And unfortunately, people who hate conflict and confrontation of any kind can be abused by people who are willing to use conflict, and threats as a means of taking control. He stopped responding. He took back his house and reunited with his sister. These days, Markowitz is looking to enjoy retirement and spend time with his girlfriend in Thailand. Well, we wish him all well, I hope. I certainly do, anyway. In April 2021, following years of effort on Marty Markowitz's part to spotlight Hershkov's misdeeds, the psychiatrist was ordered to surrender his license to practice in New York. So he can no longer practice in New York. I want to specify that. That's just the state of New York. There was a famous case as well, which I think I will definitely touch on. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys and his psychiatrist Eugene Landy, who took credit for Wilson's work, his songs that he wrote, and completely manipulated the poor man who was said to be schizoaffective, so have schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And he was just a vegetable. I hate to say that term, but he was doped up on medication that he didn't need. He gained a shit ton of weight, and he was utterly dependent on Dr. Landy. I think of Dr. Peter Langton or Howard Blandy from SpongeBob when I hear that name. But this is just in the state of New York. And the reason I bring up Eugene Landy is because he had to surrender his license. He then got another license in another state and could practice there. The United States doesn't look so united in that sense, does it? As the Shrink podcast revealed, Markowitz was not Hershkov's only victim. Other former patients told Sarah the psychiatrist similarly took over their lives, convinced them to rewrite their wills to benefit the doctor and or his family. The state's Department of Health concluded that Hershkov broke minimal acceptable standards of care in the psychotherapeutic relationship. Minimal acceptable standards. So I'm kind of wondering, are they saying, you know, this is the bare minimum that you should be doing as a psychiatrist, and you still broke them, as in, you're taking the piss here, mate. So, like, say if you might have taken on a client without knowing that they were a sibling of another client, and that was a conflict of interest, but that'd be minor, that'd be minimal. But I'm thinking, are they saying here, not only have you broken small rules, you broke the minimal that is expected of you, you've broken them. I hope that's what they're saying, because if they say this is only minor. I think that's a bit of a piss take, to be honest, but the minimal acceptable standards of care in the psychotherapeutic relationship, as I say it back in my head, it feels like what they're saying is this is the least that we expect from you is that you upkeep these guidelines and you haven't done that. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that's what they're saying, which is definitely true. In November 2021, Hirschkopf told the New York Times he plans to appeal the health department's ruling. And he sees it as he's done nothing wrong. You know, he's a complete another narcissist. 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 What a word. And that gets thrown around a lot, that word. Gets thrown around so much that I'm losing my voice. But it does, you know, too much. But it applies to this man. If we're going by the series, and other people have said it, you know, a lot of people have made complaints about him. Miriam, who was played by Soraya, is her name Soraya Blue, um, who plays Miriam in the series. There's also other quite attractive young women that aren't portrayed. They're just have bit parts, but Dr. Ike's quite touchy feely with them. And Miriam was convinced not to speak to her parents. She cut all ties with her parents. And then she starts crying and breaking down to Marty in the series because she never got to say sorry to them, or they never got to speak again over a minor disagreement. It's never really made clear exactly what that is, but she falls out with them and then they die, and she never got to make up with her mother. That was a big thing she wanted to do, and she's really upset because Ike convinced her, Dr. Ike Hirschkopf convinced her not to speak to her mother ever again, you know? So there's a few things to unpack there, and like, what can we learn from this? I think we can safely say if the series isn't completely correct, very it's very much looking negative against Dr. Reich. He's not looking too hot in this situation. At the end of the last episode, Will Ferrell's character, Will Ferrell plays Marty, and Marty says, without any lawyers in here, anybody, you know, kind of going, without you being fake and trying to impress everybody, have you got anything that you'd like to say to me? Obviously, hoping you realize you've ruined my life, cut me off from my family for 27 years. Have you got anything to say, like an apology or anything? And he has the audacity, Dr. Ike, Paul Rudd's character, to say, I forgive you. Oh, do you? And then he goes, unbelievable, Marty. And he walks off. He's like, really? You forgive me? Okay. Unbelievable. I think we've said all we need to say. And it's so satisfying because then he just walks off. And that's the best thing I think you can do in a situation like this. He probably should have done it to begin with, but I'm going to keep this up just to have it here on the side. But what do I think about this? Is Marty to blame? Because a lot of people were saying, well, you know what? He got himself involved. He could have said no. He could have stood up for himself at any point, and he didn't. And I can see why that's an easy argument to make. And I see why you'd say that, you know, like, oh, grow a backbone, man, you know, tell him what's what, you know. He's obviously not very confident. He has trouble standing up to a little old man who's been coming to the family for years. You know, he's probably going to keep coming back regardless of a small little error. Like, I know the joke they say is that Jews are tight with money. You know, it is a real stereotype. Some of which I've heard Jewish people agree on, but Marty certainly wasn't tight. You know, he was very generous with his money. So potato, potato. Us Irish love a drink. It's one that we have to agree on. We definitely do. But you know, it's kind of like the stereotype of the old Jewish man who's a bit tight with money. They say the same thing about Cavan men, and Scottish men. So you're kind of like, oh, he'll probably chance his arm. You know, it's just in his nature. But Marty is so physically, you know, he's like this. You know, he's visibly discomforted by conflict, even in crowds. You know, like it's not even just conflict; it's the spotlight being on him. He's so comfortable by it. So imagine if someone, I'd hate to think like if he was walking down the street and someone mugged him. I'd say he'd hand over everything. He'd be the type to go, "Oh, I'm sorry, please, just take everything and leave me alone." That's so sad to think of good people getting taken advantage of like that. But you go into a not just a life coach, some make you up person who has a bullshit qualification, like a 3 month qualification that they got online. This is someone who, got their qualification from New York University, which is a very prestigious university, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Definitely are medically qualified. So that's a fact. They are medically qualified. We know this. And I'm coming to see them because I've got trouble being assertive. I've got trouble setting healthy boundaries, setting limits. So I'm admitting all this, and I'm under, there's a confidentiality clause with this. You have a duty of care as a psychiatrist or any, mental health practitioner. You have a duty of care to look after that person, you know, within reason now, you're not responsible for that person's entire life. But like I said, I was going through a really tough time. I was seriously thinking of ending my own life. I called up my counsellor. I didn't call him up at midnight because I agree that's a bad thing to do. And you hear of a lot of patients that are like that, really demanding. And it's often put on the patient, or the client, if you like. But he took the time, he rang me back and he said, "Are you okay?" Stayed on the phone with me for half an hour and said, "You're doing fine. Would you like me to book an appointment?" No hassle if no. I said, "Look, I appreciate it, Tim, but money's quite tight right now. Um, and I'm looking to get an appointment through the HSE, which is our health service over here in Ireland." And he was like, "No problem. I hope you're well. Stay well, please." And you see that level of empathy. He's a counselor, yes, but he's also an empathetic human being. Dr. Ike clearly didn't have an ounce of empathy, lacked a lot of it. At first, it's like, "I'm going to help you. I will help you. Let's go out here and, let's get you out here. Bit of exposure therapy. Let's do it. Expose yourself to everybody." No, not that kind of therapy. I don't blame Marty. You could say grow a backbone. Maybe in the business world, you could say that, but with a psychiatrist, Dr. Ike is totally to blame here. He overstepped every boundary, taking on Phyllis as a client. He should have been like, "No, I can't because that's a conflict of interest. I can't see two people from the same family because I might take your side over your side and vice versa. So it's kind of like he broke that. That's the first violation I saw anyway. I'm kind of surprised they didn't really bring that up. Um, because everyone I've been to see is like, if I'm seeing you, I can't then see your mother or your mother and your brother and your father. It's a direct conflict of interest, you know. But Marty has admit, well, he didn't admit. Phyllis persuaded him, you know. But he went into therapy and he was kind of, I'm iffy about it. Then he found out that it was actually kind of helping him be more assertive, set healthy boundaries, which he clearly didn't have as a kid growing up. Um, Being a very anxious kid, I would say I can relate to that 100%. And he clearly was anxious as a kid, if we're to believe his first bar mitzvah. My dad was very critical, and that made me very anxious. I was like, "Oh, he's right. Yeah, I just have to soldier on and man up and get on with it." I've put myself in a lot of situations that made me extremely uncomfortable. Confrontational situations where I had to say something, even though I was like, "Oh no, I'm sweating here." I literally just sucked it up, hoped for the best, and balls to the walls, went straight in. Didn't want to, but did it. Yeah, you feel good afterwards, but if that keeps happening for long enough, you're exhausted. If you're someone who struggles to be assertive like I am, I'm much better at it now at setting healthy boundaries from the get go. You set the tone that I will not be fucked over, I will not be taken advantage of. In a polite way, there's plenty of people who are good people, but they let you know instantly, "You will not fuck me over, you will not treat me this way, I'm not standing for this." You don't even have to be a prick about it. You can just simply refuse to be in that person's company. When you're vulnerable like Marty, and he clearly has trouble making friends, he clearly got used in a relationship. She was trying to, where his ex fiance felt she was entitled to a all expenses paid holiday without him. He should pay for it because he said he would. As a couple, yeah, we're going as a couple. He even offered to give her two coupons. He's like, well, I have them. I may as well give them to her. And then Dr. Ike was like, no, no, you use them. You're thinking he has my best interests at heart. There's even a scene in the first episode where he goes into the apartment of the ex fiance, which I think is another violation, if I'm not mistaken. You shouldn't be doing that, going into other people's homes with your client. But anyway, he doesn't seem to care about the boundaries or the guidelines. But he's like, he will not be paying for your holiday. That's a fact. He even pretends to be his lawyer in the series. I don't know if that really happened. So I have to say, I've only watched the series, haven't heard the podcast. I'd love to give it a listen though. Um, but he seemed like, he really had Marty's back. And that's a nice thing to have. This guy has my back. He'll fight with me. I feel comfortable when he's around. He helps me be more assertive. So I'll bring him in as a consultant in my company. Again, overstepping the boundary, making an absolute killing because Marty had to pay Dr. Hershkov for all the lost patient time that he would have had normally, his normal schedule. So he just keeps taking and taking, and Marty keeps saying how grateful he is for everything that Dr. Ike has done for him. I think you mean to you because, geez, he took everything. And I think as well, someone who is in a position of power, it's a warning to people who are the patient versus the doctor. Yeah, they have qualifications, but doesn't mean they're right about everything and you're wrong. But it's very easy for him to get himself into that position of power, especially if you're a narcissistic individual. You get yourself up here into a position of power. People now trust you. People now believe this guy knows what he's talking about. Whereas this guy, he's the little patient. He is the psychiatrist. So if anything this guy says, oh well, I'm the psychiatrist, this man is mentally ill, I'm looking after him. Don't worry, I'll deal with him there. You know what I mean? So any outrage or anger or displeasure that Marty would have shown could just be put down to, he's a patient, he's a lunatic, he's weak, he's trouble setting boundaries, but I'm working with them. I am high and mighty. You know nothing. You are just my patient. You're absolutely nothing. Back in your lane there. We'll just think of a sausage party. Our most pristine. I always struggle to do that. Ancient and untouched. But the goddamn fucking crackers. Bill Hader. So yeah, like if you're an extremely narcissistic individual, what are you looking to do? You're looking to get power. Like, and a psychiatrist has a steady supply and like a narcissistic supply is coming in. I'm sucking it up, I'm eating it up because I'm dealing with people who are clearly mentally unwell and I'm clearly held in high esteem by them because I'm a doctor and I'm a psychiatrist. So not only am I helping them with their problems, but I've got all my medical degrees. I went to New York University. I'm obviously, Billy Big Bollocks. I know everything and you know nothing. And so it makes people less inclined to believe the client, the patient, because they're the one in therapy. The psychiatrist is the one in the right. He's the one that knows everything. The patient is just some lula, who came in for help and is a disgruntled patient. Nobody listens to him. That's why abuses can happen in hospitals and people go, oh, hush, hush, because you're my patient and I'm the doctor. I have authority over you, essentially, It's like if you have a narcissistic boss, it's a fucking nightmare because they have power over you. The worst thing you can ever be is in a narcissist's grasp, shall we say, or, be subservient to a narcissist. Like, if they're in a position of power over you, you bet your arse they're going to use it. It's not always going to be obvious. It's going to take time. They're going to gradually just, take over. And if you grew up with extremely domineering, narcissistic parents, maybe, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but maybe Marty and Phyllis did. Maybe they grew up in a very domineering, narcissistic household where you have to be the top dog, be a high achiever. And his dad was like, "Don't make me look bad now with this company. I'm entrusting you, Marty, with all this. Don't ruin our family name. And Phyllis is kind of picking up the pieces and trying to make Marty feel good, but Marty's trying to please everybody. It seems like he's a real people pleaser. Again, I'm not a psychiatrist or nothing, but I made a video about avoiding personality disorder. Marty seems to fit a lot of the criteria for that, a lot of which overlaps with autism. And I made that video. Autistic people like myself, we can struggle with boundaries. So I think there's a real message here. We will deal with a lot of medical professionals, and it shows you how easy it is for this shit to happen. And the worst thing that happens is that Dr. Hershkov has to surrender his license in one state. That's it. I was like, so we didn't have to repay all the money. I was hoping. I haven't read this full article. I read most of it, but I was really hoping he had to pay something back that he stole from Marty, but he hadn't actually broken any laws because Marty was a patient and he willingly let him into his home. So he's not breaking any rules, is he? But he overstepped every boundary as a psychiatrist. So there's that. I guess Marty's just happy to be shut of him, and may he enjoy his retirement in Thailand with his girlfriend. I'm happy to say that he's met someone. Yeah, look, it's a real warning, and I'm going to touch on this in further videos, but it's something I really wanted to look at because I think it's important to not think everything I think is wrong. The psychiatrist has a power over me, and I'm down here, they're up here. If I think anything or I say anything, oh no, down with you, down boy. You doubt yourself, and if you're like Marty and you are obviously very anxious and withdrawn and don't like the spotlight on you, you're avoidant as well. It's extremely tough to stand up to very, extroverted and dominating type of personalities, masquerading as people in positions of care. I've definitely worked with people and I'm there thinking, are they trying to manipulate me? And luckily it's just, words or trying to make me doubt myself, gaslighting me. Because they know how to do the job. I don't. I'm at their mercy essentially. And I found myself in those positions a lot where people I felt weren't training me properly and telling me I was doing stuff wrong when I wasn't. But I couldn't correct them because they've been there longer. They know what they're doing and I don't. And I have to learn from them or I can quit the job. And then my shame kicks in, where I'm like, I can't quit, I have to keep doing it. And you see how people can dig their way into you. And this is an extreme case, how someone can pretend to be someone else's friend, just use them as a personal piggy bank, essentially, cut them off from their whole family, and convince them their family's evil and out to get them, make them part with family treasures, make them cut down family trees, and the prized koi in the garden. Um, Fish, in case you didn't know, in the pond. Really nice. But Marty was very friendly with the fish. He liked beekeeping. There's another hobby that he took up. He's obviously a very gentle soul, and it's unfortunate to see some master manipulator in a position of power, like Dr. Ike Hershkov, take complete control of him and manipulate him like he did. Sad, it really is, but at least Marty woke up and got what little time he has left with his family back. It's happy to see. And guys, I think we will leave it on that. It's been a good video, and I'm glad I made it. Let me know what you think. Anyway, did you watch the series? What did you think of it? Have you ever been in a situation where someone has manipulated you and got you to part with prized goods or anything like that? How did you cope? How did you get rid of them? If you've got any advice or if you haven't gotten rid of them, but you want to please let us know because maybe I can help. Maybe I can be a shoulder to cry on, or hopefully not a Dr. Hershkov. I've too much of a soul for that. But yeah, reach out and let us know, guys. You don't have to suffer alone. I hope this helped anyway. I hope you enjoyed it. Gonna go have some dinner now, and I'll see you in the next one. It's longer fall, guys, and stay well. It's been a really good July, and I'm looking forward to August. See ya.